Let me tell you a story that will completely change how you think about judging people by their appearance. My name is Robert Harrison, but everyone calls me Bob. And until 6 months ago, the entire town of Millbrook, Ohio, thought I was just a failure. You see, I'm 58 years old, and for the past 15 years, I've been working as a janitor at the local elementary school. I wake up every morning at 5:30 a.m. in my tiny one-bedroom apartment on Maple Street, put on the same flannel shirt I've worn for 3 years, and head to work with my mop and bucket. To everyone around me, I looked like exactly what they expected. A divorced guy who couldn't make it in life, living paycheck to paycheck, driving a beat-up 15-year-old Toyota that sounds like it's dying every time I start it. But here's the thing. And this is where the story gets interesting. Appearances can be very, very deceiving. That morning, the day before my daughter Emma's wedding, I got my usual call from her. She's 24, works as a nurse at the local hospital, and she's the light of my life. "Morning, Dad," she said, and I could hear the stress in her voice. "You nervous about tomorrow?" Now, let me tell you about tomorrow. Emma was marrying Marcus Wellington III. And if that name sounds fancy to you, well, you're right. The Wellingtons are what you'd call old money, the kind of family that owns half the businesses in 3 counties and thinks their last name makes them royalty. "A little nervous," Emma admitted. "Marcus wants everything perfect. His family is flying in from New York today. The Wellingtons don't do small weddings." I stirred my instant coffee. Yes, instant coffee from a chipped mug that said "World's OK-S Dad," and I felt that familiar knot in my stomach. Because you see, from the moment I met the Wellington family, they made it crystal clear what they thought of me. I was the embarrassment, the janitor father who somehow produced a daughter good enough for their precious son. They tolerated me the way you'd tolerate a stain on an expensive shirt, something unfortunate that you just have to work around. After Emma hung up, I stood in front of my bathroom mirror, looking at the face that had earned me sneers from my daughter's future in-laws. No college degree visible, no expensive clothes, no fancy job title. Just a simple man who'd raised his daughter alone after her mother walked out when Emma was 14. "Oh, you'll never be anything more than a janitor, Bob," my ex-wife Patricia had said during our divorce. "Emma deserves better than a life of struggle." Those words echoed in my head every single morning as I put on my navy blue uniform with Millbrook Elementary custodial services embroidered on the chest. But here's what none of them knew, what nobody in that entire town knew. As I walked into that elementary school that morning, greeting the kids who always ran up to hug my legs and ask about my weekend, I was carrying the biggest secret in 3 counties. You see, that failure they all looked down on, that useless janitor who wasn't good enough for their social circles. I was worth almost $1 billion, and in less than 24 hours, they were all about to find out. Now, before I tell you about the disaster that was about to unfold, let me explain how I ended up in this situation, because I know what you're thinking. If I'm really worth that much money, why was I living like this? The answer goes back 15 years to the day my wife left me. Patricia walked out because she was tired of struggling. She wanted the finer things in life, and she didn't think a man with my background could provide them. She took nothing in the divorce except our car, because she said everything else was beneath her standards. That night, sitting in my empty apartment with 14-year-old Emma crying in her room, I made a decision that would change both our lives forever. I took my military pension because, I served 3 tours in Afghanistan before I became a janitor, and a small inheritance from my father, and I made my first real estate investment. A rundown apartment building in Columbus that everyone said was worthless. But I saw potential, and more importantly, I saw an opportunity to help people while building something bigger. For the next 15 years, while everyone thought I was just mopping floors and unclogging toilets, I was quietly building an empire. Harrison Holdings LLC, real estate development, affordable housing projects. All registered under shell companies, all managed through holding companies with names that had nothing to do with Robert Harrison. Why the secrecy? Because I wanted to raise my daughter right. I wanted Emma to understand the value of hard work, to treat everyone with respect, regardless of their bank account, to become a nurse because she wanted to help people, not because she didn't need the money. And I wanted to see what kind of man she'd choose to marry. Would he treat a janitor with dignity? Would he defend me to his family? Would he see my worth as a human being, or just my worth as a wallet? Marcus Wellington III failed that test from day one. The rehearsal dinner was at Chez Laurent, the fanciest restaurant in Millbrook. I stood outside in my 15-year-old JCPenney suit, watching through the window, as the Wellington family held court like they owned the place. Marcus's father, Wellington Jr., was a real estate mogul worth millions. His mother, Vivian, wore more diamonds than most people see in a lifetime. His sister, Alexandra, ran a pharmaceutical company and had been featured on the cover of Forbes. When I walked into that restaurant, the hostess looked at me like I'd wandered in from a homeless shelter. "I'm here for the Wellington rehearsal dinner," I said quietly. Her smile became that special kind of fake politeness reserved for people who clearly don't belong. Emma spotted me first, and her face lit up despite the obvious stress. But Marcus approached with his hand possessively on Emma's waist and gave me a handshake that lasted exactly 1 second. "Robert, glad you could make it. I wasn't sure if you'd have appropriate attire. Now, I've been disrespected before, in the military, as a working-class guy, as a single father. But there was something about the way Marcus said appropriate attire that made my jaw clench. I kept my voice steady. "I wouldn't miss it. Of course not. Emma, darling, let me introduce you to some people who matter." People who matter. Let that sink in for a moment. Wellington Jr. materialized beside me with a scotch that probably cost more than my monthly rent. "So, you're the custodian," he said, like he was identifying some exotic species. "Janitor, actually," I corrected, though I wasn't sure why the distinction mattered. "Fascinating. I've always wondered, what does someone in your position think about during those long hours of cleaning?" The condescension was so thick you could cut it with a knife. But I'd been practicing patience for 15 years, mostly about my daughter, how proud I am of her, how she became a nurse despite all the odds stacked against her. Yes, well, she won't need to work once she's a Wellington. Marcus will provide everything she needs. A real man takes care of his family properly. A real man. There it was, the implication that I wasn't one because I didn't have money, or so they thought. Then Vivian Wellington glided over, her voice carrying that particular authority of someone who'd never been told no. "Robert, isn't it? I do hope you understand that tomorrow's ceremony is quite important. The society pages from Columbus will be there. We simply cannot have any disruptions. I'll do my best to stay out of the way, ma'am." "Oh, how thoughtful." "Marcus mentioned you might feel out of place. Perhaps you could sit in the back. Family sections are really for, well, immediate family of similar standing." Similar standing. I was being asked to sit in the back row at my own daughter's wedding because I didn't meet their social standards. That's when Emma appeared, her cheeks flushed with anger. "Mrs. Wellington, my father will be walking me down the aisle and sitting in the front row. That's not negotiable." The room went silent. You could have heard a pin drop. Vivian's smile stayed frozen, but her eyes turned to ice. "Of course, dear. I simply meant—" "I know what you meant," Emma said, and I heard steel in her voice that reminded me of myself at her age. The rest of that dinner was pure torture. Forced smiles, stilted conversation, and me relegated to talking with the photographer and florist, the other help. But here's what made it all worthwhile: watching my daughter stand up for me. Watching her refuse to let these people diminish her father. As we left the restaurant, Emma was fighting back tears. "Dad, I can't believe Marcus asked me to tell people you're retired instead of admitting you're a janitor." I pulled my daughter close, and I made a decision that had been 15 years in the making. Tomorrow, at that wedding, the truth was going to come out. All of it. That night I couldn't sleep. I sat at my tiny kitchen table at 3 a.m., staring at a manila folder I hadn't opened in months. Inside were documents that told the real story of Robert Harrison. Documents that would blow apart everything the Wellington family thought they knew about the world. My phone buzzed with a text from Colonel Martinez, my old commanding officer and current business partner. Saw the social media posts about Emma's wedding. The Wellingtons are making quite the show of it. You sure about maintaining the charade? I typed back, one more day, then we'll see. Let me tell you what was in that folder, because this is where the story gets really interesting. At the top, Harrison Holdings LLC, portfolio summary. The number at the bottom, 847 million in net worth. Yeah, you heard that right. While the Wellingtons were treating me like garbage, I was actually wealthier than their entire family combined. But it wasn't just about the money. See, I'd spent 15 years building something bigger than a bank account. I'd created affordable housing for working families. I'd funded scholarships for kids who couldn't afford college. I'd built medical clinics that provided free healthcare to people who couldn't afford it. All in secret, all while wearing a janitor's uniform and living in a one-bedroom apartment. My phone rang, startling me from my thoughts. "Dad, did I wake you?" Emma's voice was thick with exhaustion. "I was already up, sweetheart. You okay?" "I can't sleep. Marcus and I had another fight after you left." My grip tightened on the phone. "What kind of fight?" "He said he was embarrassed to have you walk me down the aisle, that his business associates would see you and think less of him. Dad, he actually suggested hiring an actor to play my father." Let me repeat that for you, because I want you to understand the full scope of what this man was saying. He wanted to hire an actor to replace me at my own daughter's wedding. "What did you tell him?" I managed to ask. "I told him if he was so ashamed of my family, maybe he shouldn't be marrying into it." Emma's voice broke. "Dad, what if I'm making a mistake?" I closed my eyes, thinking about that folder full of documents. One phone call would change everything. One revelation would show Marcus Wellington III exactly who he was dealing with, but it would also destroy the life I'd carefully built, a life that had taught Emma the value of hard work and genuine relationships. "Em, do you love him?" I thought I did. "But the man I fell in love with wouldn't treat you this way." That's when I made the call that would change everything. I dialed my lawyer. "Harrison Holdings, emergency line. This is Robert Harrison. I need you to prepare the full disclosure package. Every document, every holding, every investment. I want it ready for delivery by noon today." "Sir, is everything all right?" "Just do it, and contact our legal team. They may need to attend a wedding today." As dawn broke over Millbrook, I made myself a cup of coffee and began preparing for what might be the most important day of my life. Not because I was giving my daughter away, but because I was finally ready to show the world who Robert Harrison really was. And let me tell you, the Wellingtons were not going to like what they discovered. The morning of the wedding, I stood outside the bridal suite at the Millbrook Country Club, watching my daughter get ready for what I suspected might be the last day she'd ever have to deal with the Wellington family's disrespect. I knocked on the door and heard Emma call out, "Dad, I was wondering when you'd get here." When I walked in, she was sitting in front of a mirror in the most beautiful wedding dress I'd ever seen, surrounded by hairstylists and makeup artists. But I could see the tension in her shoulders, the stress around her eyes. "You look like a princess," I said softly. Her smile, the first genuine one I'd seen in days, lit up the room. But then she said something that made my blood boil. "Marcus said you might be detained today. Something about last-minute set-up duties. He mentioned that since you understand that kind of work, maybe you could help the catering staff. Let me make sure you understand what just happened. On my daughter's wedding day, her fiancé wanted me to work as hired help instead of walking her down the aisle. The photographer, a woman named Sarah who I knew from school events, lowered her camera and shook her head in disgust. "Emma, honey, your daddy's not here to work. He's here to walk his little girl down the aisle." That's when Vivian Wellington burst through the door without knocking. "Emma, darling, you look lovely. Robert," she barely acknowledged me, "I hope you brought proper shoes. The aisle is quite long and work boots would be unfortunate in the photographs." I looked down at my polished black dress shoes, the same ones I'd worn to Emma's graduation. They weren't expensive, but they were clean and appropriate. These should do fine, Mrs. Wellington. Well, I suppose we'll make do. Emma, the photographer wants family photos in 20 minutes. I've arranged for some lovely portraits of you with the Wellington side of the family. What about my dad? Emma asked. Oh, well, we thought perhaps some separate shots, for your personal collection. Translation: I wasn't good enough for the official wedding photos that would hang in their mansion. That's when I'd had enough. Emma, I said quietly, I need to tell you something, but first, I want you to promise me that no matter what happens today, you'll remember that everything I've done has been because I love you. Dad, you're scaring me. Don't be scared. Be proud. Because you're about to learn that your old man isn't quite what he seems. Before Emma could respond, Marcus burst through the door. Emma! There you are. We have a problem. The photographer is insisting on putting your father in the formal portraits, and my mother is beside herself. Can't you just explain to him that this is about maintaining a certain aesthetic? Something inside me snapped. 15 years of biting my tongue, of accepting disrespect, of allowing people to treat me as less than human. Marcus, I said quietly, I need to have a word with you. Man to man. I really don't have time for... Make time. Something in my voice, the command presence I developed during my military years, made him stop. I looked at Emma one more time. I'll see you at the altar, Princess. And Emma, when you walk down that aisle today, hold your head high. You have absolutely nothing to be ashamed of. As I left with Marcus, I pulled out my phone and sent a text to my lawyer. It's time. The reckoning was about to begin. I led Marcus to the country club's library, away from all the wedding preparation chaos. The room was all oak panels and leather furniture, exactly the kind of place where Marcus felt most comfortable. Look, Robert, he started, adjusting his platinum cufflinks, I know this might be difficult for you to understand, but today is about appearances. My family has certain expectations, certain standards. Standards, I repeated quietly. Exactly. And while I'm sure you've done your best raising Emma, this is her chance to step into a different world, a better world. She deserves that, don't you think? I walked to the window, looking out at the guests arriving in their luxury cars, BMWs, Mercedes, even a few Bentleys. The Wellington social circle was out in full force. Tell me, Marcus, what do you think makes someone worthy of your world? He seemed surprised by the question. Well, education, obviously, success, the ability to provide, to contribute meaningfully to society. Let's be honest. What has a janitor ever contributed to the world? Now, I want you to remember this moment, because what Marcus just said, that a janitor has never contributed anything meaningful to the world, is about to come back and bite him in ways he never could have imagined. That's an interesting perspective, I said calmly. What would you say if I told you that the janitor you're so embarrassed by has contributed more to this community than your entire family combined? Marcus actually laughed. Right. Look, I get that this is hard for you. Emma's moving up in the world and you're being left behind, but that's just how life works. Some people are meant for greatness and others are meant to clean up after them. Clean up after them. There it was. Pure, undiluted contempt. Some people are meant for greatness, I repeated slowly. And you think you're one of those people? I know I am. I'm a Wellington. We don't just have money, Robert. We have legacy. My great-grandfather built an empire. My grandfather expanded it. My father modernized it. And I'm going to take it global. That's what real men do. They build things that last. I pulled out my phone. Marcus, I want to show you something. On the screen was a photograph of a gleaming office building in downtown Columbus. Beautiful building, Marcus said impatiently. What's your point? That's Harrison Tower. 27 floors of prime commercial real estate, built 5 years ago. Provides workspace for over 2,000 people. I swiped to the next photo. This is Harrison Commons, affordable housing for 500 families in Columbus. I kept swiping. A renovated school, a community center, a hospital wing. I don't understand what you're showing me, Marcus said, but I could hear uncertainty creeping into his voice. Harrison Holdings, LLC, I said quietly. One of the largest private real estate development companies in Ohio, specializing in sustainable development, affordable housing, and community revitalization. Marcus's face was starting to change. These are all named Harrison. Yes, they are. But that's just a coincidence. Harrison's a common name. I reached into my jacket and pulled out a business card I hadn't used in years. I handed it to him. The card was simple, elegant. Robert Harrison, founder and CEO, Harrison Holdings, LLC. Marcus stared at it like it might explode. "This is fake," he said finally. "You're a janitor. You live in a one-bedroom apartment. You drive a beat-up Toyota. The Toyota has 200,000 miles on it, but it runs perfectly. The apartment meets my needs. And yes, I am a janitor. I'm also worth $847 million. My phone rang. I answered it on speaker. "Mr. Harrison, this is James at security. Your lawyers are here to see you. Send them to the library, please." Within minutes, 2 men in expensive suits entered the room. Marcus recognized the type immediately. High-powered attorneys. "Mr. Harrison," the first one said, "we have the documents you requested. Full financial disclosure of Harrison Holdings and all subsidiary companies." He handed me a thick folder. I opened it and pulled out the financial summary. "Net worth as of yesterday, $847 million, I read aloud. "Annual revenue, $340 million. Properties owned, 847 residential units, 23 commercial buildings, 12 retail developments." Marcus sank into a chair, still clutching my business card. But why?" he stammered. "Why live like this? Why work as a janitor if you're worth almost $1 billion? I looked at this young man who had spent months treating me like garbage, and for the first time I felt something like pity. Because, Marcus, I wanted to raise my daughter to understand the value of honest work and human dignity. I wanted her to judge people by their character, not their bank accounts. I wanted her to know that a person's worth isn't measured by their possessions. I moved closer to him, my voice dropping to barely above a whisper. But mostly, I wanted to see what kind of man she was planning to marry. I wanted to know if he would treat a janitor, someone he perceived as beneath him, with basic human respect. Marcus's face had gone completely pale. "You failed that test, son, spectacularly." And that was just the beginning of his nightmare. You know how secrets spread at weddings? Faster than wildfire? Within 20 minutes of my lawyers arriving, the entire Millbrook Country Club was buzzing with confusion and whispered conversations. I could hear fragments as I walked through the hallways. "Harrison Holdings, never heard of it." "Worth how much?" "Kept it secret for years." Emma found me first, still in her wedding dress, looking absolutely stunned. "Dad? What's going on? There are reporters outside, and Marcus looks like he's seen a ghost." I took her hands in mine. "Emma, sweetheart, there's something I need to tell you, something I should have told you years ago." I showed her the financial documents, watched her eyes widen as she processed numbers that most people only see in movies. We're rich." "I'm rich," I corrected gently. "You're a nurse who's worked for everything she has, and I'm proud of that. I don't understand. The apartment, the job, struggling to pay for nursing school. The apartment is comfortable. The job keeps me grounded. And you paid for nursing school because I wanted you to earn your success, not have it handed to you." Emma sank into a chair, her wedding dress pooling around her. "Dad, I worked 2 jobs in college. I ate ramen noodles for months. We shopped at thrift stores. And look how you turned out. Strong, independent, compassionate. You became a nurse because you wanted to help people, not because you needed the money." That's when Marcus appeared in the doorway, looking like his entire world had collapsed. "Emma," he said quietly, "we need to talk." I left them alone, but I could hear their conversation from the hallway. And let me tell you, it wasn't going the way Marcus had hoped. "Tell me what you're thinking right now," Emma said. "I'm thinking that I feel like an idiot. I'm thinking that I've spent months insulting one of the most successful businessmen in Ohio." "Is that all?" "Emma, you don't understand the implications here. Your father isn't just rich. He's seriously wealthy. This changes everything." "Everything? Like what?" "Our prenup, For starters, my family will insist on protecting our assets now that we know about your father's wealth. There was a long silence. Then Emma's voice, colder than I'd ever heard it. Our prenup. Marcus, we don't have a prenup. We will now. With this kind of money involved. This isn't about money. Emma's voice rose, and I felt proud of her all over again. This was never about money. This is about the fact that you treated my father like garbage because you thought you could get away with it. Meanwhile, the Wellington family was having their own meltdown in the main ballroom. I watched Vivian pace back and forth, speaking rapidly into her phone. I don't care what Forbes says. Run another background check. This is impossible. Wellington Jr. approached me with the careful steps of a man walking through a minefield. Mr. Harrison, I owe you an apology. No, you don't. I think I do. We misjudged you. Badly. Mr. Wellington, the only thing that's changed in the last hour is what you know about my bank account. I'm the same person I was this morning when you suggested I sit in the back row. His face reddened. But surely you understand our confusion. Living as you do, working as a janitor, it's highly unusual for someone of your resources. Why? Because wealthy people aren't supposed to do honest work. Before he could answer, Alexandra Wellington approached us. Unlike her parents, she seemed more intrigued than flustered. Mr. Harrison, I have to ask, the timing of this revelation. You could have kept your secret forever. Why now? I looked toward the library where my daughter was having the most important conversation of her life. Because sometimes loving someone means protecting them from making the wrong choice, even if they can't see it themselves. You're sabotaging your own daughter's wedding. I'm giving her information she needs to make an informed decision about the man she's marrying. That's when we heard Emma's voice from the library, clear and strong. I can't marry you, Marcus. Not today. Maybe not ever. The wedding was over, but my daughter's real life was just beginning. The next few minutes were chaos, pure, absolute chaos. Emma emerged from the library, still in her wedding dress, but with a look of determination I hadn't seen since she was a teenager, fighting for something she believed in. Marcus followed behind her, looking like a man who'd just watched his entire future crumble. The main ballroom had filled with confused guests, reporters, and family members trying to figure out what was happening. I watched Vivian Wellington frantically speaking to what looked like damage control specialists, while Wellington Jr. stood in the corner, making urgent phone calls. Emma found me in the crowd and took my arm. Dad, I need everyone to know what's happening. I'm not going to let them spin this into something it's not. Before I could respond, she was walking toward the center of the ballroom. The conversations died down as people realized the bride was about to make an announcement. Ladies and gentlemen, Emma said, her voice carrying clearly across the room, I want to thank you all for coming today to celebrate what was supposed to be my wedding. A murmur went through the crowd. The word supposed hadn't gone unnoticed. However, I've just learned some things about my fiancé that have made me realize I can't go through with this ceremony. Marcus stepped forward. Emma, please, can't we discuss this privately? No, Marcus. These people came here expecting a wedding. They deserve to know why they're not getting one. She turned back to the crowd. For months, the Wellington family has treated my father with disrespect and condescension because they believed he was beneath their social status. They suggested he sit in the back row at his own daughter's wedding. They asked him to help the catering staff instead of walking me down the aisle. Marcus even suggested hiring an actor to replace my father in the ceremony. Gasps and murmurs rippled through the crowd. I could see people's faces changing as they processed what Emma was saying. What they didn't know, Emma continued, is that my father, Robert Harrison, is the founder and CEO of Harrison Holdings, one of the largest development companies in Ohio, worth nearly $1 billion. The room erupted. Cameras flashed, phones came out, and the noise level rose to a roar. Emma waited for quiet, then continued. But here's what matters most. My father kept his wealth secret to teach me the value of hard work and to test the character of the man I plan to marry. Marcus failed that test completely. She turned to look at Marcus, her voice softening just slightly. I can't marry someone who treats people badly based on their perceived social status. I can't build a life with someone who thinks a janitor is less worthy of respect than a CEO. Marcus tried one more time. Emma, I can change. I want to change. I believe you want to change now, Marcus, but I needed you to be better before you knew my father was wealthy. I needed you to defend him to your family, to see his worth as a human being regardless of his bank account. That's when Vivian Wellington made her biggest mistake of the day. She stepped forward, her voice carrying that particular authority she was used to people obeying. Emma, dear, you're being hasty. Think about what you're giving up. Marcus is a good man from a good family. Mrs. Wellington, I said, stepping beside my daughter, with all due respect, your family has shown me exactly what you think makes someone good, and it has nothing to do with character. The crowd was watching this unfold like the most dramatic reality TV show they'd ever seen. And honestly, I was just getting started. You want to know what makes someone good? I continued, my voice carrying clearly across the ballroom. It's not the size of their trust fund or the name on their family crest. It's how they treat people when they think no one important is watching. I pulled out my phone and showed the crowd the same photos I'd shown Marcus earlier. Harrison Tower in Columbus provides workspace for over 2,000 people. Harrison Commons, affordable housing for 500 families. The Harrison Foundation, scholarships for kids who can't afford college, free medical clinics for people without insurance. I looked directly at Vivian Wellington. Your son spent months telling me that a janitor has never contributed anything meaningful to society. But that janitor has housed thousands of families, educated hundreds of children, and provided healthcare to people who couldn't afford it otherwise. The crowd was completely silent now, hanging on every word. And he did it all while mopping floors and unclogging toilets because he believed that every honest job has dignity and every person deserves respect. Emma squeezed my arm and I could see tears in her eyes, but they were tears of pride, not sadness. So no, I concluded, this wedding is not happening today because my daughter deserves to marry someone who would defend a janitor's dignity just as fiercely as they'd court a billionaire's favor. The applause started slowly, then built to a standing ovation. These weren't all wealthy society people. Many were neighbors, co-workers, friends who'd known me as just Bob the janitor for years. They were applauding not because I was rich, but because they'd finally seen someone stand up to the kind of people who'd been looking down on them their entire lives. As for the Wellington family, they stood there in stunned silence, realizing that their names and their money meant nothing when measured against basic human decency. The wedding was over, but the real celebration was just beginning. Within an hour, the story had exploded beyond anything I could have imagined. Janitor Billionaire was trending on social media, and news vans were pulling up to the country club like it was some kind of international incident. I found myself in the club's smoking room, fielding calls from reporters, business associates, and old military friends who'd seen the coverage. Colonel Martinez called from D.C., laughing so hard I could barely understand him. "Bob, you magnificent bastard! 15 years you've been living like a monk, and now you blow your cover at your daughter's wedding?" It was time, James. Maybe past time. The phone's been ringing off the hook here. Every business journal in the country wants to interview the mysterious billionaire janitor. Forbes is calling you the stealth philanthropist of the decade. I rubbed my temples. This was exactly what I'd been trying to avoid for 15 years. Well, you can't avoid it now. CNN's calling this the feel-good story of the year. Humble billionaire teaches humility while secretly building empire. Through the window, I could see the crowd of reporters growing by the minute. What was supposed to be a private family disaster had become a media sensation. But you know what? I wasn't sorry, not even a little bit. Because while I was on the phone, I could see Emma through the ballroom windows, still in her wedding dress, talking to our neighbors and friends. Mrs. Henderson from the grocery store was crying and hugging her. The firefighters from the local station were shaking their heads in amazement. These were the people who mattered to me. Sarah, the photographer, found me and asked if she could interview me for a follow-up story. Mr. Harrison, everyone wants to know, do you regret keeping this secret for so long? I thought about that question seriously before answering. You know what I regret? I regret that my daughter had to find out this way. I regret that it took a wedding disaster to reveal what should have been obvious to everyone, that a person's worth has nothing to do with their bank account. And Marcus, any regrets about how you handled that situation? I looked across the room, where Marcus was sitting alone at what should have been the head table, staring at his hands while his family huddled in damage control mode. Marcus had every opportunity to show me who he really was. For months, I watched him treat me like I was invisible, like I was some embarrassing obstacle he had to work around. He could have stood up to his family. He could have defended me. He could have seen my worth as Emma's father, regardless of what he thought about my job. I paused, thinking about all those moments of humiliation I'd endured. But he didn't, and that told me everything I needed to know about the man my daughter was about to marry. Sarah nodded, scribbling notes. What's next for you? Will you continue working as a janitor? I had to smile at that question. Absolutely. Those kids at the elementary school need me. And honestly, I need them too. That job keeps me grounded, keeps me connected to what really matters. Even now that everyone knows you're wealthy, especially now, money changes how people see you, but it doesn't have to change who you are. Meanwhile, across the room, I could see the Wellington family's world continuing to collapse in real time. Wellington Jr. was on his phone, probably with his publicist, trying to figure out how to spin this disaster. Vivian was frantically scrolling through her tablet, likely reading the social media coverage that was getting worse by the minute. But it was Alexandra who surprised me. She approached while I was still talking to Sarah. Mr. Harrison, could I have a word? I excused myself from the interview and followed her to a quiet corner. I owe you an apology, she said directly, not just for my family's behavior, but for my own assumptions. Apology accepted. I've been thinking about what you said, about how we treat people when we think no one important is watching. You're right. We failed that test completely. She pulled out her phone and showed me a news article that was already trending. The internet has been digging into Harrison Holdings all afternoon. The affordable housing projects, the scholarships, the free clinics. People are calling you a real-life superhero. I cringed at that. I'm not a superhero. I'm just a guy who got lucky with some investments and tried to use that luck to help people. But that's exactly what makes it remarkable. You could have lived like a king, but instead, you chose to live humbly while quietly changing lives. She paused, looking toward where Marcus was still sitting alone. My brother is an idiot, but maybe this will teach him something about what actually matters in life. I hope so, for his sake, not mine. That evening, after the reporters had finally left and the country club staff had cleaned up the remains of what should have been a wedding reception, Emma and I sat on the steps outside the building. She was still in her wedding dress, but she'd taken off her shoes and let her hair down. You okay, princess? I'm better than okay, Dad. I'm free. She leaned against my shoulder, and for a moment we just sat there watching the sunset over Millbrook. I have a confession, Emma said quietly. What's that? Part of me suspected something, not about the money exactly, but you always seemed different from other parents. More confident, more sure of yourself, like you had some secret that made you stronger than everyone else thought. I smiled. You want to know what my real secret was? What? It wasn't the money. It was knowing that I'd raised the most incredible daughter in the world. Someone who would choose integrity over wealth, who would defend her father against people twice her social status, who would walk away from a fortune because it came with strings attached to cruelty. Emma was quiet for a long moment. What happens now, Dad? Now? Now we go home. Tomorrow I go back to work at the school, and you go back to the hospital, and we figure out how to use these resources to help even more people. The media attention is going to be intense, for a while. But eventually, they'll find another story, and we'll still be here doing the work that matters. Emma stood up and smoothed down her wedding dress. You know what's funny? I spent so much time worrying about whether I was good enough for Marcus's world. I never stopped to ask if his world was good enough for me. As we walked toward my beat-up Toyota, which, despite everything, I was still planning to drive until it fell apart, Emma slipped her arm through mine. "Dad? Yeah? I'm proud to be your daughter, janitor, billionaire, or anything in between." And that, right there, made 15 years of keeping secrets worth every single day. The next morning, I woke up in my same one-bedroom apartment, in my same narrow bed, to the same alarm clock I'd been using for years. For a moment, I wondered if the previous day had all been some elaborate dream. But then my phone started ringing, and it didn't stop. CNN, Fox News, the New York Times, Forbes, the Wall Street Journal, everyone wanted to interview the billionaire janitor who'd exposed high society's ugly side at his daughter's wedding. I let most of them go to voicemail. I had more important things to do, like getting to work. At 7 a.m. I walked into Millbrook Elementary, wearing my janitor's uniform, carrying my mop and bucket, ready for another day of what the Wellington family had called meaningless work. The difference was that now everyone knew exactly who was pushing that mop. Principal Martinez was waiting for me in the hallway, grinning from ear to ear. "Bob, you magnificent son of a gun, do you have any idea what you've done? Made a mess of my daughter's wedding. Made a mess of every snobby rich family's assumptions about working people. My phone's been ringing all night. The school district wants to give you some kind of award. The mayor wants to give you the key to the city. And about 50 reporters want to follow you around with cameras." I sighed. This was exactly what I'd been trying to avoid. "Martinez, I need a favor. Can you keep the reporters out? I've got toilets to unclog and floors to mop, and those kids need their school to be normal." "You got it, but Bob, you know you don't have to keep doing this job, right? You could retire tomorrow and never work another day in your life." I looked down the hallway, where 8-year-old Timmy Rodriguez was struggling with his backpack, his shoelaces untied as usual. Where else would I get to help that little guy learn to tie his shoes? Where else would I get to comfort a scared kindergartner on their first day? Where else would I get to be the guy who notices when something's wrong and fixes it before anyone gets hurt? Principal Martinez nodded slowly. "You really do love this job." "I really do." That's when Timmy spotted me and came running down the hall, his backpack bouncing. "Mr. Bob, Mr. Bob, my mom saw you on TV. She says you're famous." I knelt down to help him with his shoelaces, just like I had hundreds of times before. "What do you think, Timmy? Do I look famous to you?" He studied my face seriously, then shook his head. "Nope, you just look like Mr. Bob." "Good. That's exactly what I was hoping for." Meanwhile, across town, Emma was dealing with her own media circus at the hospital. But according to the text she sent me, she was handling it the same way I was, by focusing on the work that mattered. 3 reporters tried to interview me while I was starting an IV on a patient, her text read. Told them they could wait until I was done taking care of people who actually needed help. That's my girl. Around lunchtime, I got a call from someone I didn't expect. Marcus Wellington III. "Robert, I need to talk to you." "I'm listening." "Not over the phone. Can you meet me somewhere, please?" I was curious enough to agree. We met at a small diner on the edge of town, the kind of place where Marcus had probably never set foot in his entire life. He looked terrible, dark circles under his eyes, wrinkled clothes, the appearance of someone who hadn't slept in 24 hours. "I've been thinking about what you said," he began. "About treating people with dignity, regardless of their social status. And you're right, I failed. Completely." He looked down at his hands. "I've been replaying every interaction we've had, and I'm ashamed of the man I see in those memories." I waited for him to continue. "The thing is, I wasn't always like this. When I first met Emma, I genuinely admired the fact that she worked for everything she had. I told her I thought it was amazing how close you two were, despite having so little. So what changed? My family got in my head. They kept talking about standards and maintaining our position in society. They made me believe that being embarrassed by you was somehow protecting Emma's future." Marcus looked up at me, and I could see genuine remorse in his eyes. "I know I don't deserve it, but I want to ask for your forgiveness. and I want to ask for another chance with Emma. I studied this young man who had caused my daughter so much pain. Marcus, forgiveness isn't mine to give. You didn't just disrespect me. You showed Emma exactly what kind of man you are when you think no one important is watching. I know, and I want to prove that I can be better. Prove it to who? To me? To Emma? Or to yourself? He was quiet for a long moment. I don't know. All of the above, I guess. I leaned back in my booth, thinking about the man sitting across from me. Let me ask you something, Marcus. If you saw me tomorrow morning mopping floors at that elementary school, and you didn't know anything about my bank account, how would you treat me? He started to answer quickly, then stopped himself, really considered the question. Honestly, I don't know. I want to say I'd treat you with respect, but I'm not sure I trust myself yet. It was the first completely honest thing he'd said to me in months. Then that's where you need to start, I told him. Not with apologies or grand gestures, with figuring out who you want to be when nobody's keeping score. I stood up to leave, then turned back. Marcus, Emma doesn't need your money or your family's social status. What she needs is a partner who would defend her dignity even if she were a waitress or a teacher or a janitor. Until you can be that man consistently, you're not ready to be her husband. As I walked out of that diner, leaving Marcus alone with his thoughts, I felt something I hadn't expected. Hope for him. Not hope that he'd win Emma back. That ship had sailed, but hope that maybe, just maybe, this disaster would teach him to become the man he should have been all along, because sometimes the most valuable lessons come wrapped in the most painful packages. 6 months later, I'm standing in the main hall of what used to be a rundown community center in downtown Millbrook. The brass plaque by the entrance reads, Harrison Community Center, building dreams, one family at a time. Let me tell you how we got here. After the wedding disaster, I couldn't go back to hiding who I was. The secret was out, and with it came a responsibility I'd been avoiding for 15 years, being a public face for the wealth I'd accumulated. But Emma and I made a pact. We'd use this attention, this platform, to do something meaningful. The community center was our first project. I hired local contractors, provided job training programs, and created something Millbrook desperately needed. A place where working families could get healthcare, job training, childcare, and educational support. Emma left her hospital job to run the center's free clinic. She's working on her nurse practitioner degree, paid for with my money for the first time in her life, but only because it means she can help more people. Doctor Martinez will be here at 2 for the diabetes screening program, Emma tells me, appearing with a clipboard. She's wearing scrubs instead of designer clothes, her hair in a practical ponytail, and she looks genuinely happy in a way that all those months of wedding planning never achieved. And we've got 15 kids signed up for the after-school tutoring program. Perfect. Any word from the scholarship committee? They're meeting this afternoon. I think they're more nervous about picking recipients than you were about revealing your secret identity. I laugh, because it's true. Every decision about how to spend this money matters to me more than the Wellingtons could ever understand. Mr. Bob, a familiar voice interrupts my thoughts. Timmy Rodriguez runs up, still needing help with his shoelaces after all these months. Hey buddy, what brings you here today? My mom's getting her blood pressure checked, and I'm going to help with the important clipboard stuff. I hand him a child-sized clipboard, and he beams like I've given him a promotion to CEO. That's when Emma asks the question I've been expecting for months. Dad, any word from Marcus? I shake my head. Nothing in the last month. Marcus had tried to contact Emma several times in the weeks after the cancelled wedding. His messages evolved from apologies to increasingly bitter accusations about us humiliating his family and orchestrating the whole thing. The last message suggested we'd planned the revelation as some kind of elaborate con game to embarrass them. I saw he's engaged again, Emma mentions casually, to some pharmaceutical heiress from New York. The announcement specifically mentioned her net worth. Good for him. He'll be happier with someone who shares his values. Dane, as I watch families begin arriving for our Saturday health clinic, Mrs. Chen from the restaurant, Mr. Williams from the gas station, the Morrison family whose daughter is still in my elementary school, I realize something important. These are the people who always mattered to me. The difference now is that I have the resources to help them meaningfully and the freedom to do it openly. A reporter approaches. Sarah, the photographer from the wedding who's been following our story. Mr. Harrison, it's been 6 months since that unforgettable wedding day. Any regrets? I look around the bustling community centre. In one corner, elderly residents are in a chair exercise class. Near the windows, teenagers are getting help with college applications. The children's area buzzes with story time. You know what I regret? I regret that it took me so long to stop hiding. I regret that I almost let my daughter marry someone who thought my worth was determined by my bank account instead of my character. I point toward the elementary school across the street, where I can see kids playing during recess. But I don't regret a single day I spent mopping those floors, unclogging those toilets, or helping those kids. That job taught me more about what matters in life than any boardroom ever could. And now Emma and I are building something together. Something that helps real people solve real problems. As the day progresses and the community centre fills with families seeking healthcare, job training and educational support, I realize that my 15-year experiment in living humbly wasn't about teaching other people lessons. It was about learning them myself. The wedding that never happened was the best thing that ever happened to us. Because it taught us both that true wealth isn't measured in bank accounts. It's measured in the positive impact you have on the world around you. Emma found purpose. I found authenticity. And together, we're building something that will outlast any trust fund or family legacy. The Wellingtons can keep their social status and their standards. We'll keep our dignity, our integrity, and our commitment to treating every person, janitor or CEO, with the respect they deserve as human beings. And you know what? That feels like the richest life of all. Sometimes the most valuable lessons come from the people we least expect. Robert Harrison spent 15 years teaching his daughter that character matters more than cash, that dignity isn't determined by your job title, and that true wealth is measured by the lives you touch. His story reminds us all to look beyond appearances, to treat everyone with respect, and to remember that you never know who might be mopping the floors or changing the world.